We
have formed a quorum. Let's start. Welcome to this public hearing. We are going to have a meeting going all the way to 5:45 p.m. We have two papers. One issued by the government on the 27th of March. Another one is a background brief from the Secretariat. Today we are going to have received 47 deputations. There are two sessions from 2:30 to 4 p.m. and then we'll take a break for 10 minutes. The next session, session 2, will start from 4:10 p.m. to 5:40 p.m. From the EPD, we have Mr. Ao, and from the AFCD, we have Mr. Chen Kin Feng, Assistant Director, and Conservation Officer, Mr. Guan Saiping. Please invite the deputations to join us. When they are all seated, I would inform them of the basic rules for our meetings. First of all, I'd like to welcome all deputations and the team from the government. You may need to use the earpiece. Please be informed that Channel 0 is 4 language, Channel 1 Cantonese, Channel 2 English, and Channel 3 Putonghua.
We have spontaneous translation provided in different languages. And
every individual or deputation is given 3 minutes to speak. I would like to remind all of you that your speeches and submissions are not covered by the Legislative Council Powers and Privileges Ordinance. And please also take note of the notice to people attending electoral meetings and those observing meetings in the public gallery, and that is a notice about the security measures. The same has been attached to the letter sent to you by the Secretariat and is now also tabled for your information. If necessary, if you need one, you can get a copy from our Secretariat staff. And I also remind all deputations that if you have got a written submission prepared, please write down your name and your organization and hand it to our Secretariat staff before you leave. The same will be provided to all electoral members for their information. Let's invite the first speaker, the first deputation, Mr. Ngai.
Dear Legislative Councillors, I am Gavin Edwards, Conservation Director at Worldwide Fund for Nature, Hong Kong. I'm here today because the beautiful and magnificent African elephant and the future of it is in your hands. In fact, more than 3 million of these magnificent land animals, the largest on Earth, once roamed the continent of Africa. But by 1990, their population had been decimated, down to about 600,000 elephants remaining, chiefly for poaching, chiefly for Asia and the Hong Kong market. Poaching elephant ivory is absolutely brutal. The ivory is physically ripped from deep inside each elephant's skull as it draws its last breath. Governments, including Hong Kong, took action back in 1990 to ban the international trade in ivory. And since then, traders have had 27 years to sell off their remaining stock. But in the past few years, sales...
過幾年呢，
As to our suspicion, how could legitimate businesses claim to be selling little of their stock and still survive? Undercover investigators found the answer. One trader explained how to launder ivory using old stock as a front to sell freshly poached ivory. Another offered to smuggle fresh ivory and rhino horn from Africa directly to Hong Kong. In fact, about 1/3 of traders that were found in a survey recently will openly give tips on how to smuggle ivory out of Hong Kong. So while governments have been trying to regulate this trade in Hong Kong and around the world in the last few decades, between 1990 and now, we've lost another 200,000 African elephants to poaching. So we only have about 400,000 African elephants left today. Worse still, in the last decade, 1,000 rangers have lost their lives trying to protect the wildlife in Africa and around the world. And we'll hear more from rangers later for that sad human cost because of this trade. So when faced with this absolutely insurmountable challenge of trying to regulate the trade, countries around the world are concluding it's time to shut it down. China will close its market by the end of this year. Singapore is working to close its market, and the US as well. So it's no wonder that the Hong Kong government has also come to the same conclusion. This trade cannot be regulated. So I call on you, the legislators of Hong Kong, to support government's proposal to amend Cap 586, the Protection of Endangered Species Ordinance. Now lastly, there have been calls from some quarters to offer financial compensation to traders for their remaining stock. We very strongly oppose this. If compensation is offered, then poaching will actually increase in Africa. More elephants will be killed and more rangers shot trying to protect them because poachers and the gangs behind them will try to take advantage of Hong Kong's compensation scheme.
Okay.
Secondly, Hong Kong will be the first place in the world to offer compensation. Setting a dangerous precedent, we will be condemned by governments around the world.
Excuse me, sorry, time's up. So if you don't mind, can we have your submission, written submission later, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. 下一位係 Mr.
Next, Mr. Mahara, do I pronounce your word correctly?
I'm the park manager of Garamba National Park in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I manage this park for African parks in partnership with the Congolese government. I'm both grateful and sad to be here today. Grateful because I'm able to be here, I'm alive, and I'm able to speak for those who are no longer with us. I'm very sad because this is necessary and because those I'm speaking for would have wished to be here themselves. This is Richard Dingba. He was a ranger in Garamba and he was a friend. His wife had prepared him breakfast earlier than usual on the 23rd of April 2016. He shared his breakfast with 2 young children and hurried away to join the rest of his ranger team and myself at the helicopter, where I was waiting before being deployed into Garamba. His mission was to patrol and protect the elephants herd there. By 11 a.m. that same morning, Richard was fighting for his life, but his lungs were rapidly being filled with blood. Ivory poachers using automatic weapons had shot him several times in the chest, and he fell less than 20 meters away from me, where I also lay wounded at the time. I survived. Richard, Dieudonné, and Rigobert did not. Shortly after we'd taken off in the helicopter that morning, our team discovered a fresh elephant carcass. We landed at the carcass and shortly afterwards had an armed contact. The poachers were hidden in the bushes close by. It was a brutal contact, and with 3 brave rangers who fought for a heritage belonging to the world, not only to Congo, died. They died by the side of an elephant which had its face hacked off, and an unknown number of poachers. This is a situation where there are no winners. There are only losers. The amount of suffering and damage that single set of ivory caused in that part of Africa that day cannot be described with words. If Hong Kong were to compensate, the ivory trade is for the ivory, as it closes down its trade, we will see a rise of poaching in Africa. Of that we can be sure. And the message to the poachers will be that the government of Hong Kong is buying up ivory and we will see more animals and more people dying. I believe that every one of us in this world has a choice and a responsibility. Some of us have more choice than others, but nevertheless, as long as we are living, we have a choice. Our actions will shape the world of tomorrow. Richard and the other rangers who now lay buried at our headquarters and their family villages have no choice left. Let us please ensure that we, as those who still have a choice, make the right one and end the suffering that the ivory trade continues and causes each and every day. Thank you.
Thank you. 跟住係 Mr. Mangaba.
Thank you very much. My full names are Josias Mungabwa. I'm a senior investigations officer who is based in Lusaka. Also, the issue of these syndicates is quite a serious one for all that are in Africa and indeed for all that are in Zambia. These syndicates are very well motivated and they've got greater capacities which far outweigh the capacity of these law enforcement agencies which are in Africa and those which are underfunded. On average, 3 to 4 tons of illegal ivory is confiscated every year, which are bound for Asia. The scourge is decimating the rhino and elephant populations, and also loss of human lives for the rangers and civilians where such proceeds may be used by insurgencies to fight legitimate governments. Some people suggested that the trade can be regulated. This is indeed something we have tried before and failed. It is indeed simple in talking terms and not practical, as it shifts the burden of regulation to underfunded government agencies, which are already facing many challenges of fighting the increasing syndicates. The syndicates supply weapons to their members, mainly from the Democratic Republic of Congo and some few individuals from China, by way of financing these operations. The scourge is gaining momentum because the ivory trade is financing it. Therefore, the closure of markets in Asia will bring sanity to a lot of areas where poaching is currently taking place, and imposing a much higher sentences on the would-be offenders will also help us in Africa. Because for now, whatever law enforcement mechanisms we are putting on the ground, it is not working out because of the availability of market here in Asia. People still find ways and means of coming here, and people are also still dying, because of the decorative nature of these pieces of ivory which come here. Of course, from this side, it would be very difficult for you to know the problem on the ground. But the truth on the ground is that even as we speak, maybe back in Africa, someone has died because of wanting to have a piece of ivory which will find its way through here or other places in Asia just for the decorative aspect. We are losing a lot of resources. Africa will continue being poor because some of these tasks which are coming here, they are supposed to help governments in Africa to be at a level that can be also noticed by the other, places in the world as also something tangible that the African government are supposed to do.
Thank you very much.
Next, Ms. Low from the WWF. Fellow councillors, I'm Sharon. I work at the WWF, responsible for protecting wildlife. Our planet has already lost 90% or more of the wild elephants. Africa is 10,000 miles away from us, so we cannot bring Africa to the Council today. The two representatives from Africa have shown us what is really happening behind the ivory trade. What we've lost are not just the wild elephants. We've also lost many human lives. Like Eric said, last year, a team of 5 of the patrol officers went on patrol, and they
and they were lured by the corpse of a dead elephant to ambush them, and there were 3 of them actually died. And Eric was also shot, but he nevertheless he's come here to give us our testimony. And 14 children became orphans because of that incident. But this is not an isolated incident. In a year, more than 100, of these rangers suffered the same fate, and they have all left their families behind. So the syndicates controlling the ivory trade are the insurgents and the militants in Africa. They rely on poaching wild elephants and the money they make from the ivory trade to finance their activities. They do a lot of pilfering, and they're doing many things which are cruel to the people. So in the world of crime, ivory is like currency. Every year, 20,000 wild elephants are killed. And the market for the ivory is not in Africa but Asia. All the ivories are exported to Asia. From 2000 to 2013, more than 33 tons of ivory have been seized in Hong Kong. Last year, the government bought a pair of ivory chopsticks in Shangwan, and it has been confirmed that it was made of illegally smuggled ivory. So, starting from 1989, an attempt has been made to make the ban in the ivory trade, and we've also appealed to different governments to clamp down on the ivory market. 183 countries all signed, an agreement. The U.S., China, Singapore are also moving towards the same direction. Last year, when Hong Kong made the decision and undertake to close down the ivory market, we won a lot of applause internationally. The whole world is watching us and see how we're going to implement this ban. So whatever you decide today is really very important today. Thank you. Next, Mr. Wu from the DAB. I am the deputy spokesperson of the DAB. Today, I am here to express our legislative proposals for the elimination of the ivory trade. I must emphasize that the DAB supports the government enacting legislation to ban the ivory trade. Banning the ivory trade is already the international trend. On the 30th of December last year, in the State Council of China already promulgated the policy to progressively close down the processing of ivory products, and to also to ban the commercial processing and manufacturing of ivory products. And by December 31st this year, there will be a total ban. The Parliament in France also passed legislation to totally ban the ivory trade, including other member states of the EU are also conducting study and considering to impose a total ban on the ivory trade. The DAB supports the SAR government responding to the international appeal to protect wildlife. And given that in Hong Kong we have often, seized illegally ivory, wild animal, including ivory, being illegally smuggled into Hong Kong. In order to clamp down on such smuggling activities, we support the government to enforce and to step up enforcement, increase the penalties, allocate more resources, and to train more sniffer dogs, and also staff to tackle the smuggling activities. Saving any form of life is more important than anything else. The value of an elephant does not come from its task. The elephant, as part of great nature, already has its own intrinsic value, which should not be deprived just because of our greed and our commercial judgment. Without the ivory trade, there will not be any more poaching. So the DAB supports the government's proposal to totally ban the ivory trade.
港象牙工商聯會周先生，請。
OK 喺處呢，我先多謝立法會主席嘅陳淑莊議員呢開呢個公聽會，同埋多謝各位嚟到參加出席嘅議員同埋世界各地嘅朋友。
I thank all members for coming to this meeting. To be quite honest, in this community in Hong Kong, where we enjoy so much natural resource, why is there such a dumb idea to propose the legislative amendment? My advice to the government is this: don't be an ignorant government. Government officials, please look at it from the human perspective. This is not a humanitarian approach that we're talking about, because by doing this, you'll be eradicating a particular aspect of Chinese culture, of ivory industry. And a tradition, as well as craftsmanship in the Chinese culture. This proposal already victimized their parents. Now you are victimizing their children. Well, this is totally devoid of human nature. If this is passed, then the Japanese will laugh their way out, because Japan attaches importance to their ivory culture. They legislate to protect the industry. Why aren't the Hong Kong government doing the same? If we cannot protect our culture, and if we cannot protect our own people, well, how can you say you are trying to protect the African elephant? How can you do this? I can tell you that this is a piece of legislative proposal that is not going to be passed, because it's devoid of human nature. It's against human nature. Well, President Xi Jinping has raised the concept of reviving China. If we cannot protect our culture, if we have so much in our resources and still we are trying to destroy the proposal to revive China, I would like everyone to reconsider, especially those from the DAB. Next, we have Mr. Chen from Association of Ivory Processors. We have a stockpile of 17 tons now, and that's the stockpile left over from the 1990s. I don't quite understand that from 2006 2016 we allowed a lot of European ivory imported into Hong Kong. I have all these certificates showing the importation of 1,000 tons. It's from Germany. I would like to show it to those at the front row. Germany and France do not allow ivory to be imported to their countries. But in our certificates, we have ivory imported from South Africa, France, Germany, totaling 1,000 tons. Mr. Leung Xunfei from the Agricultural, Fishery and Conservation Department said this in a news program on TVB, saying that in Hong Kong there's no ivory trade. Where is Mr. Leung? He's a wanted person now. We would like to give a reward for anyone who can turn him over. European ivory, according to the information we have collected, is shown here. This is a tusk, a big one, so-called a blood tusk with no serial number, more than 30 tons in weight. But according to the AFCD, we have 19,000 pieces of ivory imported into Hong Kong. They are all the whole tusks. Why do we have such a corrupt government? The green groups know this. We have imported a lot of ivory from Europe, and you're not speaking from your conference. You want to ban ivory trade. We're more than 10 tons. Each piece is over 30 kilograms. That's the stock we have maintained. No one in Hong Kong will be so silly as to buy ivory, make or smuggle ivory. Look at it. Look at this. Look at this certificate. 1,000 tons. Tens of thousands of elephants killed. And the ivory came from Germany. Why? Members of this council should look into this. Mr. Low. I've been working in the ivory industry since 1980, and after the prohibition introduced in 1990s, I have become a gem worker. And I have still got 200 to 300 kilograms of ivory kept in the company, and I sell them in small quantities. And I've been hanging on for 27 years. We have been working under the supervision of the government. Every year, the AFCD will send someone to register the stock and take photos. And now suddenly, I'm the culprit of elephant killing. We have illegal smuggling, but that's not the same as the stock held by those who have got remaining stocks since 1990s. So why do you want to take away our property? I would like to keep the stock for my children, and if necessary, I can sell some of them to keep my company afloat. Well, we have so many experts here. They are saying that elephants are being killed for ivory, but that's got nothing to do with those people who have stocks, who are craftsmen for decades, and now you want to get rid of this trade. Why? And we have this piece of a document from the AFCD dated 24th of September 2009, allowing 41,000 kilograms of ivory products and raw material. The imports were allowed after the ban in 1990s. And in the meantime, I have been observing local laws and the international convention. I abandoned my craft in order to comply with the international convention. I sell them slowly in small quantities, and then suddenly the Hong Kong government allowed imports and exports. Before 2009, you told us that no, we should not sell ivory, and then suddenly you allow imports and selling. And the government is not doing a good job in supervising the trade, and now you want to victimize the innocent parties. Miss Kwok.
speak on behalf of the International Fund for Animal Welfare and its 2 million supporters worldwide in support of Hong Kong government's proposed legislation to increase penalties for wildlife crime and phase out Hong Kong's ivory trade. We urge the government to shorten the grace period by stopping license renewals immediately. Over the past century, Hong Kong's ivory market has already played a major part in the decimation of tens of thousands of elephants. The legal ivory market had confused consumers, stimulated demand for ivory, provided loopholes for criminals to launder illegal ivory from poached elephants, and fueled the poaching. In 2006, Hong Kong Customs seized a large shipment of smuggled ivory weighing 3.8 tons, containing 600 tusks. In 2012, Hong Kong Customs seized another shipment of smuggled ivory of similar weight, containing 1,200 tusks. This means that the poachers incentivized by the rampant ivory markets here are killing even baby elephants for their tiny tusks. Concerned for its role as an accomplice in elephant poaching, Chinese government is leading the world in shutting down ivory markets on the mainland. This concern is shared in China by Chinese from around the world, including Mr. William Chak, Vice President of Hong Kong Antique Collectors Association. Mr. Chak calls for antique collectors to be ethical and reject the ivory trade. I congratulate him for making the 10th International Auction Fair last weekend in Hong Kong ivory and rhino horn free. Ivory trade anywhere threatens elephants everywhere. Surveys show 90% of Hong Kong's ivory buyers are not from Hong Kong. The existence of Hong Kong's ivory market will continue to increase burden on law enforcement and enable traffickers of ivory from Hong Kong to the mainland. It will continue to bring shame to Chinese people around the world and tarnish the global reputation of Hong Kong as a progressive and enlightened metropolis. We urge Hong Kong to start phasing out the ivory market as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
多謝晒。跟住有請黃良喜博士。
Dr. Wang Lianghe. Ivory trade is not an art, it's not a culture, so there's no question of making compensation. Ivory trade is a damage to the natural environment. In the ancient times, ivory was obtained from the dead animals. And now this mainly obtained through poaching. In many cultures, ivory is a symbol of happiness. An elephant is also a symbol of wisdom and a mascot. But the value of ivory products is in the craftsmanship, in the carving technique. We cannot say that skinning techniques is an art form. The craftsmanship is something that should not be allowed to exist in today's world.
So there are good and bad traditions. You cannot blindly, retain all the traditions. Ivory sculpture is not tradition. We're talking about the art of sculpture. The art could be actually applied to different materials. So people are making a huge profit, and that is not tradition. It is actually a shame. I think our sculptors, is it the case that they cannot apply their skills on other things other than ivories? And how much of the profits, of the ivory trade goes to the workers? the business people who make such huge profits, you cannot say that they suffered a loss because they shouldn't have made such profits in the first place. Because we want to protect these people, that we should continue to, allow the ivory trade to continue. Because we appealed to them to stop, but they refused to do that. They kept stockpiling ivories and trade in ivory products. So that is not acceptable. Actually, the sculptors can actually, through training, apply the skills on other materials. Thank you, Dr. Wong. 多謝係。
I am a law professor and a criminal lawyer in Hong Kong. I do animal-related law projects, and I'm very happy to be here today to give you my view on the proposal. I have compared the sentences for wildlife crimes across comparable common law jurisdictions, and Hong Kong penalties are currently amongst the lowest in the world. This is despite the fact that the average value of seizures in endangered species is now second only in Hong Kong to seizures under the Dangerous Drugs Ordinance. Worse still, the cases that do go to court do not even end up with high penalties. In most cases, low sentences are applied, with offenders being given a few months in prison at most, and in most cases a trivial fine, not commensurate with the cost of the animal that has been laundered on the black market. The offenders are generally people who claim to have no knowledge of the chain from which the animal was derived, and investigations are superficial. For this reason, I support the increased penalty provisions in the proposed bill, and I urge legislators to support it. However, overseas jurisdictions have realised that raising penalties is insufficient to deter what is now the fourth most lucrative criminal enterprise. To meet the challenges of effective law enforcement in Hong Kong, I urge legislators not only to raise the maximum penalty, but to recognise offences under Cap 586 as organised and serious crime under the Import and Export Bill. Only then will law enforcement officers have the opportunity to utilise the full investigative powers open to officers combating drugs and people smuggling. Those powers would allow prosecutors to forfeit the proceeds of wildlife crime and to enhance sentences for the criminal gangs that are involved in the trade in endangered species, as is currently the case in relation to incense tree theft. Finally, I wish to speak against the suggestion that ivory traders should be compensated for the loss of their trade. To compensate traders would not only legitimise past crimes, but it will encourage further poaching of an elephant population that has already diminished to unprecedented levels. Traders have had sufficient time to sell their pre-ban stock, and a further 5 years is more than adequate. For these reasons, no compensation should be provided. Thank you for hearing me.
多謝晒。
Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Ho Shing. My name is Ho Shing. I came to Hong Kong since the end of the Second World War. I was an apprentice for 5 years, and then I started to work as a sculptor, ivory sculptor. I didn't have enough work then, and I tried my best to make ends meet, so I bought some ivory materials to work on them myself. I sold my own products, but now the government is saying that there will be a ban and an embargo. So I've been keeping my stock of ivory for 5 or 6 years. I carved up the products. The AFCD has already come to my premises twice. So nobody is buying my products, and then now so I can't make a living, and even my children have to suffer because of the ban. And I mean, I will be accused of illegally, possessing ivory, and I'll be in prison. What am I going to do? I learned the skill when I was a teenager, and I have been keeping these ivories for several decades. It's not a lot. I put it in a tiny box. It's not a lot. Why are you saying that I should be locked up and fined? I have obtained licenses twice. The AFCD, came to inspect my premises. I have nothing to do with the illegal poaching of the elephants. The stock that I have, I acquired several decades ago. So why am I, I don't know why I'm involved with all these environmental issues and so on. So even after I'm dead, my children would suffer. They may be accused of illegally in possession of ivory. It doesn't matter if I should die, but even my next generation will have to suffer. I don't know what the government is doing. I'm only possessing a small quantity. I've worked as an ivory sculptor for many decades. I still have a very small stock, and you're saying that I will be arrested. I don't know what the government is doing. I just don't understand. I don't understand all these environmental issues. I mean, what I do is perfectly clean. So the ivory that I have, my stock of ivory, I've acquired many decades ago. I don't work on any ivory now. I mean, these are the ivory products which I sculpted several decades ago. The government is now. So if I don't lose my license, if I cannot sell my products, how will I have the money to pay for the license? Thank you. Fellow councillors, ladies and gentlemen, I have 3 questions to ask in relation to this photo. First of all, I'm thinking that, well, this picture here is quite shocking, but I thought that for the poachers, would they be so stupid to use a knife or a saw to cut up the elephant like that? Because the skin is so thick, they will only be able to chop it off in several hours. Why can't they take the shortest period of time to cut off the tusk? Let's be sensible. Now, this is actually, what does it mean to the Chinese people of Hong Kong and China? And secondly, in Africa, they now have roughly about 550 wild elephants in Zimbabwe and other African countries. There's a total population of 550,000 elephants. The death rate is about 3%. So we're talking about 16,500 elephants which die of natural death. And the tusk weight on average about 7 kilograms. So there would be already 33,000 pieces of tusk. The weight should be 231 tons. Coming from elephants which die of natural death, I don't therefore understand. For we've had the ban on import and export ivory for more than 20 years. Why is it that people are still killing wild elephants to obtain the tusk? There is already oversupply already. Just imagine the whole world is now banning the ivory trade, and it's very difficult to obtain the licenses and so on. Why? Given the oversupply, some people say every year 40,000 elephants are killed. So I just don't understand. Why? I mean, is it that the government, the customs, the excise department, and people who are protecting elephants are not doing a good job? Thank you very much, Mr. Siu. Next, we have the Ivory Trade Association representative, Mr. So. Thank you very much for allowing us this opportunity to make a submission here today. 2 days from now will be June the 8th. is the 27th anniversary of the ban on the ivory trade. On June 8, 1989, it was officially announced that the ivory trade will be banned, including the ban on import and export. Many ivory traders and people in the business were really worried, including the workers. But we had no other option. We had to comply with the government's instructions or directions. But I would like to ask the government one question. Since there was a ban on ivory trade in 1990, why do we still have a double standard for ivory or tusks from Europe to be allowed to be imported in Hong Kong? In a family, we have 4 generations of people working on ivory for close to 100 years. We've never heard, I asked my seniors, they've never heard of materials, ivory materials from Europe. But the fact is that more than 1,000 tons of ivory materials from Europe have been approved to be imported in Hong Kong by the AFCD, the Agriculture, Fishery and Conservation Department. Now, I have here a letter. This is a letter from a supplier who buys the ivory products from Europe. It's dated November 2015. All these are original letters with the stamp. Originally, I planned to send it by email, but I must bring the authentic document. I want to uncover one thing. That is, these people can state in the letter however much you want, how ivory material you want, we can supply that much. In 2006, we first approached people who claim to have ivory materials to be imported in Hong Kong. So I notified the AFCD and told them I discovered there were some ivory materials coming into Hong Kong. The AFCD just told me that these are pre-convention ivory and they could be freely traded and enter any country in the world. If that's the case, since Hong Kong is not a major market, the ivories are mainly re-exported to China. Why didn't they go straight to China? Why must they pass through Hong Kong? This is because these there are some problems with these materials. I can also tell you that in 1990, there were a total of 700 odd tons of ivory materials in Hong Kong. In 2006, when we discovered these so-called pre-convention materials coming to Hong Kong, our goods were stuck. I hope you understand that this is a problem created by the AFCD in Hong Kong, and the legitimate traders in Hong Kong should not be made to bear the responsibility.
Legislative councillors, representatives of the government, esteemed park rangers, NGOs, private citizens and ivory traders. I am grateful for the opportunity to affirm our organisation's support for the bill that is long overdue, that which will bring about the abolition of the ivory trade in Hong Kong. On behalf of myself and my colleagues at the ADM Capital Foundation, I wish to say that the ivory trade of Hong Kong has persisted for far too long. Accordingly, we are in total agreement that the trade should be banned in as expeditious a manner as is possible. We agree with the 3-stage plan and the decision to raise maximum penalties under the Protection of Endangered Species Ordinance Cap 586. However, we vigorously oppose any suggestion that there should be any compensation for anyone engaged in the ivory trade. The result of this bill will be the end of a brutal and bloody trade which profits from pillaging corpses and mutilating the faces of majestic and sentient species. The ivory trade has literally built itself upon the body parts of a fellow mammal. There are no defensible arguments being posited by the traders sitting here today, and they excuse themselves of any complicity or culpability in the deaths of hundreds, if not thousands, of elephants. Yet Hong Kong's traders peddle in body parts and have been caught red-handed, filmed confessing to laundering blood ivory, poached in countries racked by political instability and all-out civil war. They have profited from bloodshed. They have infused their, quote, legal stockpiles with freshly poached tusks. Hong Kong's traders are a critical cog in a complex, far-reaching and violent machine. Hong Kong's ivory traders have been provided with a 27-year grace period. That was 2 years before I was born. If they haven't been able to sell their legal stocks, perhaps that is a sign from the consumer that it is not a product worth buying. These traders made a bad bet. Perhaps they are simply awful salespeople. Whatever the reason, what right do these individuals have to demand that the people of Hong Kong bail them out? I ask you, why should Hong Kongers foot the bill for their ineptitude and lack of foresight? We are an international city, and what we do here matters. Hong Kong has long tarnished its international standing on behalf of these traders. We have stood in defiance of 183 signatories to CITES who are striving to eradicate the ivory trade, including the People's Republic of China. It is time for us to join these nations in the 21st century. After all, it is 2017.
多謝晒 ，thank you。跟住係香港。
Next, we have the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Hong Kong, Mr. Woodhouse, or Miss Woodhouse.
And welcomes efforts to improve the protection of all endangered species and phase out the ivory trade in Hong Kong. The illegal trade in endangered species presents a serious threat to the survival of many wild animals and plants. The legal ivory trade in Hong Kong also poses a serious threat to elephant survival. During poaching operations, animals may be killed for their body parts, often using methods that cause much suffering. Alternatively, they may be taken alive for illegal trade, where much suffering also occurs. Historically, when illegal wildlife trade cases have been detected in Hong Kong, the penalties imposed have been low, especially when compared to the vast profits that can be made from the exploitation and trafficking of endangered animals. Significantly increasing the maximum penalties for different offences under Cap 586 will help to deter such crimes, as well as will removing the softer punishments for wildlife crimes committed for so-called non-commercial purposes. Consequently, the SPCA supports the introduction of significantly higher maximum sentences under Cap 586. Much of this crime is transnational in nature and uses global and local criminal networks, which may be involved in other forms of organised and serious criminal activity. Taking into account the serious and organised nature of much of the illegal wildlife trade, we also support measures that allow the utilisation of special investigative powers, allow the confiscation of proceeds related to wildlife crimes, and allow enhanced sentencing. The SPCA believes that wildlife crime should be considered an organised and serious crime and should be included in relevant ordinances so that actions can be taken to identify the members of the broader criminal networks and hold them to account. The SPCA strongly supports the phasing out and banning of the ivory trade in Hong Kong, and that this should be done at the earliest opportunity. We believe that the majority of people in Hong Kong care greatly for the environment and animals and want to stop the brutal slaughter of the world's elephants. A public opinion poll by Hong Kong University found that 75% of Hong Kong people do not support the ivory trade. Recently, we found that many people are under the impression that the phasing out and banning of the ivory trade is already in progress. Thus, this proposal is actually in keeping with the current beliefs and wishes of a large majority of Hong Kong people. The SPCA does not support compensating ivory traders, as we can see that any price placed on ivory will fuel demand. The goal of this proposal is to help stop the slaughter of elephants, not encourage it. We do, however, support efforts to provide assistance to ivory carvers and other trade employees to help them retrain and find new employment if it was deemed necessary through government programmes. We ask that all legislators support the amendments to Cap 586 to ban the ivory trade and not pay compensation. Thank you.
Thank you. 跟住係鍾建華先生。
Mr. Chung Kin-wah. Madam Chair, members, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chung Kin-wah. On the 3rd of October, I submitted a letter to this council, and that is the views from the inactive but legal possessor of ivory. According to a paper from the AFCD dated February last year, there are 370 licenses in force. Most of them hold less than a few hundred kilograms of ivory, mostly kept in their homes. And 84% of those covered in the survey said that they would like to sell the ivory, waiting for the opportunities to arise. Most of them are therefore inactive traders. Many of them are masters, craftsmen, or of their families. And some of those inactive traders are now the businessmen or in other trades, or they may keep some stock for their children. In July last year, with the assistance of Honorable Chen Hengban, there was I attended a meeting with the AFCD. Some of the old attendees said that they were forced to change to another trade, and the stock they are holding, they regard them as their pension. And then an elderly person said he did not want to sell his stock because he was the sculptor. And another person said, well, that would worth quite a bit, and he was happy. I hope you understand that you are talking about the property of some elderly people. Some of those workers had to work as cleaning workers, taxi drivers because of the ban, and they lead a very difficult life. Now they may be holding to the tens of kilograms of stock. That's their, or dozens of kilograms. That would represent their net worth. Many of them saw their money went up in smoke due to the Lehman Brothers scandal. But many of these elderly people hold on to the stock because of sentimental values. Many people were very emotional in that AFCD meeting, and I pity the AFCD officials for that. Well, perhaps you can give us your written submission. Just write down your name and hand it to our staff. Mr. Chu Chen-pong. I'm a legal possessor, license holder of ivory. Well, my grandfather and my father were traders, so I succeeded their business. Well, I didn't want to, but the ivory can be kept for a long time. It never expires, so to speak. It will not perish. But business has been difficult. We set up some counters in some Chinese emporium in Hong Kong, but some green groups advocates harass us, forcing us to close down. But of course, it's difficult for me to accept it. So I operated 2 shops myself after that. And now we are told that 5 years later, there will be a total ban. So how am I supposed to deal with the remaining stock? And in recent years, I have imported some pre-convention raw material, ivory material from Europe. So we were allowed to import those. And now suddenly you want to impose a total ban in 5 years' time. How can the government do this? That's all I want to say. Ms. Kwan Kip-man, the last speaker for this session. Good afternoon. Well, I think I understand the views from both sides. I'm not a businessman. Of course, I don't want to give any people any encouragement to slaughter animals. And I do not claim to understand the trade very much. I don't know whether this is about abandoning the ivory from dead elephants. Or can it be compared to the organ donation for for the utilization of ivory, if it's harvested from dead elephants, then maybe we are turning something useless into some crops, and that may be a better way to utilize natural resources. And in any case, we don't have many sculptors left. The question now is about whether we allow them to trade ivory anymore. I know very little about commerce, but I want to say something about the culture, the ivory culture. So the point is, if we want to prevent poaching or slaughtering of elephants, then we should find better ways to utilize ivory from dead elephants and use that tusk. Maybe that would be a way to keep the traditional ivory trade, which is important in Chinese culture. And I think this is also important to all of us. Mr. Chung and some other individuals have sent emails to our panel, and we may receive more emails subsequent to this meeting, because we have received many views. And we are going to refer those views and submissions to the members of the panel. And let's have a response from the government. Mr. Au, I thank all the deputations for coming to share with us your views. We know that there's a growing international trend to pay attention to ivory trade. In the State Party conference last year, the state parties were urged to close their local markets expeditiously. This has been duly noted by the government, and we are doing the same along that direction. And it's not a question about the lives of elements, but also the safety of rangers. So I think Hong Kong must do its part and close down the local ivory market as soon as we can. As mentioned by some of the deputations, some workers might be facing the employment problems. Well, we understand that. So under the current proposal, we are going to offer assistance to relevant workers in the form of retraining opportunities. And we just hope that their technique can be applied to some other areas. It's really about sculpture, the technique of sculpting, and that's what we want to preserve. And some deputations have commented on the question of compensation.
Compensation, Hong Kong will be setting a bad precedent for those at the front line. Whether it's the poaching of the elephants and the safety of the rangers, there will be an adverse impact. So the government therefore does not believe that we need to provide any compensation. We shouldn't be doing that. We should protect the elephants, and we shouldn't encourage the ivory trade. I also like to emphasize again that we will be happy to work with the affected workers to see how we can help. Thank you very much. Next, we have 5 members who would like to ask questions. Shall we allow 3 minutes per member, because we're scheduled to finish at 4 o'clock for this session. Claudia Mo, she's not in the chamber. Mr. Charles Mo. Madam Chair, I'd like to thank the deputations, especially those who come from overseas to come here today to make the submissions. I think Mr. Ho was very agitated when he spoke, so I wonder whether the department could do a better job in dealing with the situation. I hope Mr. Ho will understand that 27 years is a long time. We have to put an end to this sometime anyway. Mr. So mentioned the ivory materials on bureau. I think he made a very good point. I believe the department will also need to explain its policy more clearly. We have people from the ivory trade today, and with our expatriate friends present, sharing us with their unfortunate experiences. I think some were not being very respectful. They were sneering and laughing. You may not agree with what they are saying, but this form of expression, it's really unbecoming, and it's as citizens of Hong Kong. And some would criticize, some of them criticize other people saying that banning the ivory trade is inhuman. I don't understand what the logic. Using parts of our animal to create works of art, whatever, however you call it art or tradition, that is inhuman. There's no point talking about Chinese culture. I'm sorry, such cruel form of culture, if they were part of Chinese culture, I would like them to be deleted. So I don't think you should associate that with the president of China. The DAB was trying to do that. So if you want to compare ourselves with Japan and Europe, let's not compare the bad things that we do and say that they're just as bad as we are. But in fact, we are not. We are already behind. So some argue, well, what have we got to do with the killing, the poaching of the white elephants? But the fact is, the stockpile and so on, you say it's all right if you take the tusks, out of dead elephants. But you are shifting the focus. You're not. Yeah, it actually is a loophole and provide an excuse for the illegal poachers. So 27 years is a long time already. We need to put an end to this.
You have my support and sympathy, and I must also offer an apology to you for some of the things that were said by some of the ivory trade representatives here today, and some of the selfishness and short-sightedness, the cruel and insensitive attitudes that they display. And I want to assure you that people I know in Hong Kong do not feel the same way. We're with you. And we hope that we can pass the law to ban all ivory trade as quickly, as soon as possible.
好，多謝莫乃光議員。
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Ms. Claudia Moore, thank you. I have a question for the officials. For the ivory traders and the ivory sculptors, they are asking for a lot of compensation. Is the government determined not to accede to this demand? Mr. Au. I think the government has thoroughly considered the various factors. It is our objective that we should prevent the further poaching of the wild elephants. Having considered all the facts, we believe that we shouldn't be offering compensation to the affected traders. There are several factors we've considered. Firstly, there's been a long period of time for the trade to prepare themselves. The ban was implemented in 1990, and the international trend is to close down the ivory market. And in Hong Kong, the ivory trade is a very small trade. According to our survey, people who are still actively in the ivory trade are very small in number. So are the affected workers. And thirdly, for anyone suggesting that there will be compensation, we will be sending out the wrong signal to the international community, and this may result in more coaching. And the frontline, rangers may also be affected. So I therefore don't believe that we should offer compensation. But still, for the workers, we care about them. We hope that in terms of retraining, we can help them, switch to other forms of employment, at the same time ensure that the skills will be able to pass on.
Morale. Some of our traders or carvers were complaining that, first of all, it's their life skill. Question number one. And then two, the stock which they had accumulated over the years were accumulated over the years. And the deaths, the elephant deaths in Africa, they shouldn't have a direct link with their trade, really. And they're now being victimized. To that, how would you reply?
Thank you. The truth is that there is no such thing as regulation when it comes to a commodity which is so rare in the world today, we are seeing one end side of it, where so many different armed groups are being able to sustain themselves only through this trade in a commodity. And we believe that trying to put the responsibility of managing a trade, which is difficult to manage in first world countries, such as China and Hong Kong, is completely impossible in third world countries, where many of the African ivory is derived from.
Thank you, Mr. Maraf. Sorry, time's up. 麻煩你跟住係葛珮帆議員。
Elizabeth Kwok, thank you. Some ivory traders claim that the stock comes from elephants which die natural deaths. So I'd like to know how many elephants in Africa die of natural death, and can the tusk be freely exported for trade if it comes from dead elephants?
Yeah, in the ideal world, you'd probably think that that should be a possibility, and if it was something such as livestock that we were actually managing in that way. Again, we're coming back to the point that these elephants are in countries, and the largest populations of them are from countries which are still third world countries, and they do not have the possibility to capacity to manage any form of regulation, and it would be completely responsible for all of us to try and put the responsibility of managing whatever is a tusk derived from a poached elephant and an elephant which has died of natural death to a country which is just not even capable of securing its own people. It's almost impossible.
Okay, Mr. Mangawa.
Yeah, first of all, to start with, any ivory gotten from elephants dying of natural causes remains the responsibility of the government agencies involved. And the usage or the selling aspect is regulated by CITES. And where there is a ban in place, this is not applicable, as the ban supersedes any other suggestions supporting the trade, unless where there is maybe a national or a government request for research purposes only.
Chairman, somebody said that you could saw off the tusks and you don't need to kill the elephant. So I'd like to ask the two experts from Africa whether you could do that, you saw off the tusks without killing the elephant. Eric, would you like to answer the question?
The short answer is no. You have to kill an elephant to take his tusks. A tusk is essentially a tooth, and it's got a nerve inside it, so it's impossible to cut it anyway. You will need to kill an elephant in order to get its tusk.
Ms. Kwok? Yeah, closure. Mr. Mangawa, would you like to answer the question as well?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the same answer, that there's no way an elephant a tusk would be cut from an elephant without having it dead. You have to kill it first.
Okay, 唔該晒。咁跟住我想畫條線。
Next, I'm going to draw a line because we're scheduled to finish at 4 p.m. because we have a second session yet. There are 4 more members in the queue: Mr. Hui Chi-fung, Chen Hang-ban, Leung Kai-chang, and Mr. Wong Ting-kwong. Mr. Hui Chi-fung? Mr. Siu Ka-fai? And Mr. Eddie G. Mr. Hui. I support the government's proposal to enact legislation to impose a total ban on the ivory trade. It's not because of the international trend of conservation or the need to improve the image of our city. We're really concerned about the existence of the ivory trade, which has directly resulted in poaching, the irresponsible poaching of elephants, and smuggling. According to many years of observation, we see that there is a close relationship between the two. As for compensation, I would like to ask the public and all members this question. If we have seen that in the ivory trade there had indeed been evidence of smuggling, that we have seen illegal poaching of wild elephants, does it mean that if we offer compensation to the ivory traders, what sort of message are we sending out to the international community? Is it that the trade has not done anything wrong? If we pay them, that we will be sending out that message. If the government refuses to pay compensation, I think this is a form of public education, sending out the important message that what was done in the past was wrong. It's a mistake we've made, and we have to admit that. Only then can human civilization advance if we are prepared to admit our mistakes. So I'd like to ask the representatives of the trade, do you agree that a very large there has been smuggling, involved in the ivory trade? Mr. Chen, this is not your turn to speak. If you want to protest, I'll see whether or not Mr. Hui will ask you to respond to his comments. I'm putting my question to everyone. I think you only have 3 minutes. You need to direct your question specifically to. Would you agree that? Why don't you name whom you would like to answer your question, Mr. Chow? Mr. Chow is from the Hong Kong Ivory Trade Association. We take tusks out of nature. We appreciate nature. It's all a cycle. Do you agree that you have black sheep within your trade? And there had indeed been smuggling. I believe within the whole world, even in this council, we have black sheep. If there are black sheep, they are only a minority. Very few of them in Hong Kong. Very few. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hui. Mr. Chanang Ban. Mr. Charles Mock criticized the comment made by a gentleman here as a member. I think for any craftsman, whatever his trade, we have to respect his trade, because he's not employed in an illegal industry. We shouldn't criticize what these craftsmen have been doing for the last few decades. Coming back to ivory, it would appear that the innocent have become the scapegoat. So I have to ask the AFCD this question. Does Germany allow the export of ivory to Hong Kong, or exporting them to Hong Kong for re-export elsewhere? I also like to respond to a question raised by Mr. Charles Mock as well. Some representatives from the trade refer to ivory materials from Europe, especially a lot coming from Germany. The so-called European materials are pre-convention ivory. The pre-convention ivory have all along been allowed to be imported into Hong Kong. People call it European materials or ivory because many of these pre-convention ivory, there's a larger stock in Europe, and that's why these materials would be sold from Europe to other countries. They had such stocks in Germany, but in Europe, many countries, including Germany, have now banned the export of ivory. When did they start to impose a ban? For ivory export, they only banned the export recently. Previously, Germany and so on, they allowed that. France, UK, Sweden, and so on. They only started to ban the export of pre-convention ivory last year. Same for the EU. They have a directive starting from July this year. They will ban the export.
Some of the traders ask why our government allow the imports of such material, but it was always allowed according to the convention. From 1996 to 2016, according to the records, 16 tons of pre-convention ivory was imported, and also there were 19,000 pieces of ivory products imported to Hong Kong. So according to your records, these were legally imported from Germany. According to my information, Germany banned exports for a long time, and yet after that, the AFCD still approved the imports from Germany. Isn't that appropriate? Well, we have been complying with the provisions in the convention. We're not just talking about Germany. If we are talking about any country, if there's a certificate to certify that the material is pre-convention material, the imports will be allowed. So we will only, Mr. Chan, I think that's about all for your time.
I have to make 2 points. I think the ivory carving technique is not unique to China alone. In fact, in ancient Egypt, 5,500 years BC, they've got carvings from elephant ivory and hippopotamus teeth already. So this is not something unique to Chinese culture, and don't mistake this, because there are a lot of ivory carving techniques available in many jurisdictions, and these countries have already banned ivory trade. And to be fair, if given 27 years of grace period, and there is still no demand at all for the stock of ivory, which I think many business traders have stocked up, that means there is no demand in the past, there's no demand for the present, and there's no demand for the future. So if there is no demand, that means that is a dead market. So if there's a dead market, then they will have to abolish the market. That is as simple as that. I mean, I'm not talking about difficult theories. So if there's no demand, that is it. The market should be abolished. And of course, ivory trade has become illegal in a lot of jurisdictions. Ivory carving is not, unique to the Chinese culture. There are a lot of Chinese culture. We don't want to have it. For example, opium smoking in the 19th century is part of our culture. Dog eating is part of Chinese culture. Do we want this kind of culture to preserve for the next generation? I think not. Thank you.
好，唔該晒梁繼昌，跟住黃定光議員。
Mr. Wong Ting Kwong, thank you, Madam Chair. I thank all those who have come to our meeting. I think there are different views, but to the DAB, I have a clear position here. I support environmental protection, and my nickname is Elephant. But to be honest, we are talking about a trade with a long history. It used to be legal all over those years, and we have generations of people, including sculptors, including traders, who have been working in this trade for generations. And now, when the government wants to phase out or to stop a particular trade, well, you must have good justifications. And this should be properly planned. It should not be done in a rush. All the relevant factors should be carefully considered. So I beg to differ from Mr. Au that we don't need to be too concerned about it, because there will be no significant impact. Well, even if we are talking about a minority, we have to take care of their interests. And also in the past 20-odd years, whether it's a pre-convention ivory or the exemption for pre-convention ivory, well, if you have allowed them by issuing those certificates, you should properly check whether it's a pre or post convention. It seems that you are just a bureaucrat. You look at the certificate. If it says it's pre-convention, then it's pre-convention. The government should bear the responsibility. I support environmental protection, protection of wildlife, protection of endangered species. But the government should consider the interests of any trade. You cannot just turn a blind eye to their pride. You cannot say that you care only about wild elephants, but not the fate of traders and craftsmen. There's no need to be emotional. Mr. Chow, no need to be emotional. You mentioned DAB, and then those people cast their sight at me. I'm from DAB, but now you know my position, okay? Thank you, Mr. Elephant, Mr. Siu Ka-fai. I thank all the deputations who come here on behalf of the elephant. I don't think we should kill off elephants, and elephant trade should be phased out. But I would like to say that ivory is a traditional trade. The products are traditionally regarded as cultural artifacts. In 1919, there were 400 tons in stock, and now 463 stocks. Now only 77 is left, but they haven't really sold off all the stock. And now you're saying that 5 years later, no more trading is allowed. So what are you going to do with their assets, their properties? Who will compensate them? We are talking about two different sources, tusks from dead elephants and tusks from poaching. But these traders are innocent people. Why don't you enforce the law against the illegal traders, the smugglers? And if some people say that there are robbers who rob the goldsmith shop for gold, are you going to ban the gold trade? I hope the deputations will understand that you should not approach, you should not say anything when it's not your turn. It's not your turn. All right, I'll give back your 10 seconds. I know who are not obeying the rules. But you have people who have invested in ivory. It's very much like an investment in gold. Well, you know that there are people who buy a piece of ivory product as a decoration, but we have also got people making investment in ivory. And under our basic law, Article 105, property right is protected. We cannot allow the government to deprive one's property. Well, when we have avian flu, we culled all the chicken population in Hong Kong, and you have to pay compensation. So you must find a way to settle this thing. You should allow them to keep their properties. And they said that it's inhumane to kill animals. But you cannot say this. If you have a wallet or a pair of shoes made of leather. Now, since we have Eric, I have a question for him. Should the government pay compensation, what will be the consequences?
From my perspective, on the ground in Africa, we will see a rise in poaching. You got to remember that the countries where the poaching is happening are very far away from here, and the message comes out very differently on that side than what it's maybe intended for on the ground here. And you will see that over there, within weeks, maybe even days, we will already see a rise in poaching. more dead animals and more dead people. We have seen this in the past. As soon as ivory prices go up in the east, within days, more elephant and more people die.
好多謝晒。咁啊，今日啊，好多謝咁多位出席嘅
All right. I thank all the individuals and deputations, and we are concluding this session. I hope the next one will start at 20 past 4. We'll start at 4:20 p.m. In the meantime, let's have a break.